Anil, I use this analogy a lot of times. You visit a construction site. There are two workers who are breaking stones. You ask the first worker, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm breaking stones." You ask the second worker, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm building the tallest tower in the world." It's almost like a no-brainer that who would be doing his work in a better manner, even though it is just breaking stones. And the point I'm trying to put across here is that as founders, as the leaders of the organization, what are you doing to build the pride quotient in your organization is extremely important in order for you to retain your people.
Hello everybody, in this exciting episode we sit down with Saurabh Nigam. He's the HR leader, angel investor and author of a brand new book, People-Powered Startups, Building a Culture of Collaboration, Innovation and High Performance. With over 2 decades of experience, Saurabh shares actionable insights on building a thriving startup culture, avoiding common HR mistakes and hiring the right people at the right time. He talks about how to retain top talent and dealing with toxic high performers and the 3 non-negotiables in any startup culture and red flags that indicate a new hire isn't working out. So please enjoy the show. Thank you. Hello, Saurabh. Thank you for coming on the Indian Startup Show today.
Thank you, Neil. Looking forward to this conversation with you.
Yeah, so tell me about this book then, People-Powered Startups.
The idea to write this book was really to talk about people, HR practices in the startup ecosystem, specifically focused and centered around Indian startup ecosystem. And the reason for me to talk about that in my book was because in my own career as an HR professional for last almost 2 decades, I have had the chance to work with a lot of startups and helping organizations set up their people practices. And I realized that, over the years that there isn't really a playbook, so to say, which practitioners like me can refer to when it comes to, what works and what possibly will not work when it comes to HR practices in startups.
Let's say I do have a startup. What sort of employee count, do I first feel the need for, dedicated HR support?
That's a very tough one. But then the thumb rule really is, Neil, the moment you feel that you cannot have or you don't have the bandwidth to be able to spend solid quality time with each of your team members as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, is the time when you need to get an HR person in place. Now, that could be 2 people, depending on the kind of business you're running. That could be 20 people as well. If you really ask me, somewhere between 20 to 50 people is where I see most organizations feeling the need and having the requirement to get an HR person on board.
In terms of hiring strategies and techniques, you're probably expert on this. What are your top hiring strategies and techniques?
So, Neil, I think 2 parts to it. When you're looking to hire, first and the foremost thing you need to be very clear about is that why are you hiring that individual, or why are you hiring for this role? Where does it fit into your org design, right? And how does it enable you to grow the business as you are envisaging it to? I think that clarity is extremely important, and that's where the point of which I made, which is the figuring out the science based on which you are going to grow your team, expand your team, is extremely critical. Once that is clear, once you have a very clear idea, insight around why you're looking to hire for a particular role, that automatically will help you define the roles, responsibility, the success measures for that particular role. And once you have that, I think then it becomes pretty straightforward in terms of defining how are you going to evaluate an individual around their capability to deliver on the role which you have defined in terms of the roles and responsibility. Now, that's one part. And to me, that is the easier part of the equation. The tougher part of the equation really is, what is your style of working as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, or as a leader for that matter? What is your style of working? What is your ways of working? What's okay and what's not okay when someone is working alongside you? And having a very clear idea about it is extremely important. Always tell leaders that, putting it down on a piece of paper or on a Word document is extremely important. And then making sure that, you are not only communicating it to your prospective hire, in terms of how you work, your ways of working, what's okay, what's not okay, is super important. But equally important is making sure that you are convinced that the person whom you're looking to hire will fit and will align with your ways of working. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people call that as culture fit and all of those things. I mean, I just call it from an alignment to your ways of working. Mm-hmm. Now, why I say it is more critical and more important to evaluate and assess and be convinced about that aspect while hiring is because skills you will be able to train and teach, right? But this aspect around alignment with your thought process, with your wavelength and your ways of working is next to impossible to teach and train, right? And that's where most of the hiring mistakes get made, right? So when I hire, I index a lot more on the second aspect, which is the alignment aspect, because skills is easier to judge and evaluate.
I suppose that maybe a problem where startups hire too early. Have you had any experience of that?
Oh, yeah. So it's linked to the fact that, as I say, more often than not, there is this understanding or this belief that, you need to have people in the team enabled to grow in order to grow. And that how many people you need to have is, invariably thought to be as almost like linearly correlated. And that's where you end up hiring earlier. That's when you end up hiring a lot more than you actually need. And that's where, some of the biggest mistakes startups end up making.
Got a new hire. What are the sort of like the early warning indicators, that this hire is not working out?
So ultimately, I think the early warning signs is purely related to the ones which gives me warning signs are, when you see that somebody is not as motivated as you thought they would be when you were hiring them, right? And to me, that's a big red flag. To me, somebody making early mistakes in the job you have entrusted them with is not that much of a big issue, actually, because everybody has a learning curve, right? When it comes to any new job, any new role, or in any new organization. Where I find it challenging, and for me, the biggest red flag is that, I would expect a person joining into a new team, a new organization, will come in all guns blazing, right? Will be enthusiastic, will be supercharged, will be super motivated to pick up things, hit the ball out of the park, do some impactful work, make a mark for himself or herself. When I don't see that spark early on, right? To me, that's a big red flag. Now, that red flag could be because of expectation mismatch. That red flag could be because, the wavelength mismatch or the values mismatch. But to me, that is where I get jittery when I see new joinees not having that zeal and that kick in them to get on with things, learn new things, and make a mark for themselves at a new place.
High performing employees who are also toxic, toxic high performers. They may be the best developer in the world. What advice would you give to that startup founder?
Yeah, I think it's important to define what's okay and what's not okay while working in your organization. I think that is very, very important. Unless you define it, people will assume what's okay and what's not okay. And that is a recipe for disaster. So once you define it, as I said earlier on as well, once you define what's okay and what's not okay, a lot of people call it culture, a lot of people call it ways of working in your organization, but then you need to define that and you need to articulate it, emphasize and re-emphasize it to your teams day in and day out, right from the time when you're looking to hire, as you manage day to day, it needs to be re-emphasized. Because once you do that, I think then it becomes absolutely imperative that you ensure that everybody is towing the line as far as your ways of working is concerned. And the moment you see that someone is not, someone is crossing the line in terms of what's not okay in an organization, just as a very simplistic example, if you ask me, it's not okay to raise voice when working in my organization. It's not okay. Whether it's in public or private, it's just not okay, right? And to me, it's articulated, it's said, it's told to everybody in no uncertain terms, and I follow it day in and day out, right? Now, if that's be the case, and the moment you see that someone is actually falling off the curve on that particular aspect, then as a founder, as a CEO, it's your responsibility to call it out, to have a word, right? Figure out the reasons, rationale, and also make sure that the person understands that it's not acceptable. I think if you don't do that, then this, if I may use that term, bad behavior will only keep on increasing, right? And as a leader, it's your responsibility to nip it in the bud. Only way you can do it is when you have defined what is a good behavior and what is a not so good behavior in your organization, and then making sure that you call it out when that gets played out in your own.
Would you also actually do coach, do some coaching as well? Look, you're bad coaching upwards, as it were.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So having a word, having a conversation with those individuals, as I said, is the starting point, and then figuring out what is triggering those kind of behaviors and how you can help them to come out of that is obviously the first port of call, right? Coaching falls in that bucket as well, by the way, right? It is also possible that, mendable, right? And if that be the case, then I think some tougher conversation and tougher decisions you should be able to take as well.
Yeah. Go back to your early days then. What chapter from people-powered startups would have saved you from most headaches?
A couple of them. The entire chapter on organization design and culture. Then there's a chapter on the 20 mistakes 20 HR mistakes which startups make. That's another chapter which is very close to Yeah, 20. I mean, I had to restrict myself to 20.
Okay. Go on, give us some mistakes then. HR mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like for example, one of them I already talked about, which is hiring too early or hiring
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah.
Right. That's one. Second, I would call it out not having one keen eye on the entire labor laws and compliances on in the geography you're operating in.
Mhm.
That's the second one. Just thinking that okay, I'm too small to think about laws and compliances. Unfortunately, laws and compliances don't work like that. They get
Yeah.
applied even if you're 5 members,
Yeah.
right? And they come and bite you if you don't focus on that.
Mm.
So that's the second one. Third one, I think, is the fact which I talked about is how much you should invest in the learning and development of your people, right?
Mm.
And should it be a function of revenue? Should it be a function of your HR budget? Or should it be a function of actually the needs of your people itself? I think that's something which a lot of organizations end up making almost like a black and white decision. It really is a black and white decision. So those are some of the things which I've talked about. So that's a chapter which is very close to my heart, and pretty much every single mistake I've made. That's why it was easy for me to write and to reflect upon it. But yeah, I mean, if there was a chance for me to know about these and be aware about these when I was going through my own journey over the last 2 decades, I'm sure I would have been a far more effective HR person at that point of time. But then
Mm.
possibly if that would have been the case, I would not have written this book. Someone else would have.
A lot of startups do fail. I just want to get your So a lot of startups do fail, unfortunately. From your experience, why is that?
One obvious fact is you kind of underestimating or overestimating the market itself or the potential of your product itself or potential of your services itself, right? And that's one. Second is when you fail to adapt to the changing external environment, whether it's competition, whether it's socio-political environment, or the needs of your customer itself, and if you don't change and adapt fast enough, right? That's the second one. And third one, which is where my expertise, so to say, comes in, or which is where my book talks about, is you got your product right, you got your services right, you got your market fit right, absolutely, but you haven't got your people and people practices right. You're bound to fail because none of your strategies, none of your business plans, growth plans can fructify if you don't have the right team in place to be able to execute it for you, right? So that's the third one. I can't see of any other reason why startups fail.
In terms of retaining staff, that's really important as well. You want to keep the best to your rivals. Any effective way to keep them loyal, as it were?
Yeah, the first and the foremost is to figure out the pride quotient in your organization, right? Anil, I use this analogy a lot of times. You visit a construction site, right? There are two workers who are breaking stones, right? You ask the first worker, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm breaking stones." You ask the second worker, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm building the tallest tower in the world," right? It's almost like a no-brainer that who would be doing his work in a better manner, even though it is just breaking stones, right? And the point I'm trying to put across here is that as founders, as the leaders of the organization, what are you doing to build the pride quotient in your organization is extremely important in order for you to retain your people, right? And there are other factors as well. I'll talk about it. And the reason I'm calling this out is because you spend 8, 10, 12 hours in an of a day working for an organization. When you go back to your family, friends, right, you should feel happy, excited, and charged to enough to talk about where you're working, what you're working on, what are you trying to create as an organization, as a team, and how's it gonna change the world, impact the world, right? That's what pride is all about, right? And if you're able to build that out, I have seen that it is almost next to impossible to pull someone out of that organization if he or she has great pride in what the organization is doing and how he or she is contributing in that journey, right? So to me, the biggest retention factor for any organization is to figure out the pride quotient, right? The impact which you're creating and how your people are contributing to create that impact. That's one. Second, I think related point I would say are the things which are very obvious. People do talk about it, but it is really, are you building a environment of trust and transparency? I've seen some of the best performers out there. You may pay them the best dollars out there, but if you don't treat them with trust and transparency and respect, they will scoot out, out of your organization, right? So to me, trust, transparency, and respect are almost like three non-negotiables of your culture, of the ways of working in any organization. If you don't have that, If you don't have that, you're not going to have people sticking around. When you talk about trust, transparency, and respect, you can pretty much link every single people HR practice to that, right? So trust and transparency around your performance management systems, trust and transparency in your compensation strategies and designs and plans, trust and transparency around the day-to-day working, the day-to-day engagement with your people. All of that is linked, right? So to me, retention really is a factor of whether you're able to build pride quotient in your organization, and second, are you able to build an environment and a culture of trust, transparency, and respect. Everything else to me is good to have, not must to have, right? You may not have TT tables in your office, you may not have free lunches in your office, but if you have those two elements, you invariably people will stick around.
It's interesting. Startup founder's been working in his bedroom for the last 3 or 4 years and raises lots of money, raises lots of capital, and has to hire something like yourself, a corporate person. Talk about that. That must be an interesting intersection.
Yeah, I mean, see, ultimately, and I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and founders over the years, who have been at different stage of their evolution. It's a given that at some point of time there is a realization that they need to have someone as almost like a thought partner to move alongside them, to help them build the organization and help them create the right people practices, right? Because it's really the people who make up an organization, right? You and I as individuals, we can have our own paths, right? The fact that we have decided to come together in a team, in an organization, is because we are trying to achieve something together. In order to achieve something together, we need to have those mechanisms in place which enable us to work together and achieve those milestones together, right? A soccer team has 11 players, a cricket team has 11 players, each one of them has a role to play, but those 11 players have come together in order to achieve a common objective of winning that game. How do you keep your flock together? How do you make sure that everybody has clarity around what they need to do to contribute towards the team winning the game? And then how do you make sure that you have the right people into the team itself? All of these things need a right thought partner. And that's where, people who start from their garages, start from their bedrooms, as they start building out their organization, the need for the people and people practices starts coming in. And that's where, they realize that they need to have a thought partner, which is really your people practitioner who needs to be there alongside him or her to partner and build the organization.
What's the number one HR issue you have to deal with?
In startups, I think the number one pain point for any organization which is growing and evolving is to identify the right people, identify and onboard the right people. I mean, that's the key, right? I mean, the example I used, you cannot have a soccer team without 11 players on the field and another 5 players on the bench, right? So a coach, a manager needs to figure out those 16 odd players for the team first and foremost. And that's exactly the case with the startup, right? So the biggest pain point I have seen while working with variety of startups is every single entrepreneur and founder, first thing they tell me is, get me the people, get me the right people, right? So to me, that's the number one thing, right? And then there are other things which start coming in. The moment you have a group of people coming together, everybody comes in with their own aspirations and expectations. How do you create an ecosystem where they can work together, play together, right? So that's where the culture piece comes in, which is very unique to every organization. So how do you solve for it? How do you create an org culture or ways of working which enables every single person whom you've onboarded to be productive, to be able to deliver on the promise with which you brought them in, right? So that's the second one. So those two I would say are the most important and critical aspects of people practices which I have encountered and I have worked on in different startups.
What are your thoughts on AI?
Great question, Daniil. I think this entire discussion around AI replacing humans to me is a little far-fetched. And maybe I'm saying this, a lot of people think that I say this because I'm a people practitioner, HR practitioner, but I have very good reasons to believe that. And the reason I say that is AI is a great tool. I firmly believe that the world has moved to a stage that anybody who doesn't have the ability to leverage AI to make themselves more effective will lose out ultimately. That's a given. Okay, and that's the case with all technological advancements which we have seen over the last 2 decades. If you think about it, right? So in 90s when internet came, it became very clear that people who have the ability to leverage internet in their work profiles will definitely outshine people who were not able to do so. I think that's where AI will also come in. The reason I say why AI, I doubt will ever be able to replace human beings is simply because the way we are wired, right? So I doubt if AI will have at any given point of time will have the ability to navigate through the matrix of millions of human emotions which are out there and the way we are wired, and the millions of permutation combination which can be made within that, right? So conversation between two human beings, a conversation which you and I are having, I mean, I can't imagine how this conversation can be replaced or can be done as well or as efficiently as we are doing with an AI, whether that AI is you or me, in that is irrespective.
But in terms of hiring, you must see now a lot of CVs and cover letters that have been generated by AI.
Yeah, so words made, and that's exactly why I think that AI cannot replace human, because when I'm evaluating, speaking to individuals, or looking to hire somebody, I need to be able to evaluate somebody beyond just the words they're speaking, their intentions, their motives, their aspirations, their expectations, their feelings, their experiences over the years. Those are all the things which make up an individual, right? And I, as an evaluator, I, as an interviewer, or as a hiring manager, should have the ability to be able to go beyond just the spoken word to be able to do that. Now, how I do that, that is really the proof of the pudding. That is where I think the human brain comes in. That is where years of experience comes in, which you try and leverage in your conversations, and which is what makes me believe that it is too far-fetched to say that AI can replace humans on pretty much everything.
If someone wants to be a HR person, what advice would you give them? What skills do they need?
Okay, so beyond the functional knowledge of various HR subjects, right? Whether it is org design, compensation, performance, there's so many of them. I mean, that's, to me, is hygiene. You need to have that. But I think beyond that, what is important, and this can be controversial, this could be almost contradictory. I think two things which you need in your arsenal is that you need to be high empathetic, very high on EQ. But at the same time, you need to be extremely thick-skinned as well. I know these two things can be very contradictory, but let me explain why I say that. You need to be high on EQ, high on empathy, because otherwise you're not going to be able to connect to the people and the people's emotions. It's just not going to happen, right? Why you need to be thick-skinned is because more often than not, I've seen, and I've made that mistake as well, HR practitioners believe that through their work they should be able to please everybody, and that's impossible. Because there will be times when you'll be required to take decisions or tough decisions which may not go down well with a certain section of people in your organization. That could very well be the management as well, right? Now, but it would be the right decision for the organization or for the people, right? Now, obviously, your ability to take those decisions will be based on the fact that do you know your subject well enough or not, and how confident you are about it. But also, your ability to withstand pushback, your ability to withstand pushback from the section of people who may not be happy with the decisions which you made can only come in if you have that thick skin, right? Knowing fully well that you've taken the decision in the best interest of the company and the majority of the people out there in the organization, and yet have the ability to take that decision, knowing fully well that some people may not be happy with it. I think for that you need to have the thick skin, right? So to me, your ability to balance being high on EQ, high on empathy, while being thick-skinned as well when needed, is really what makes you a good HR professional.
Actually, going back to culture then, grow a culture where it's a remote working or remote first startup then?
Great question. And to be absolutely candid, Neil, I'm still figuring it out, right? I have a couple of my clients who are 100% remote, people spread across the entire country, in one case spread across 8 geographies. Whether we like it or not, the truth of the fact of the matter is that those organizations lack the connective tissue within their teams and within their people as much as an organization where people sit together. It's not the same, right? Now, therefore, how do you build that connective tissue? How do you build that feeling that, okay, we are in this together, we're trying to achieve something together and we're going to achieve it together, is something which, to be honest, is still work in progress for me, right? I don't have answers. Yeah, you need to figure out ways to remain connected with people, connected with people beyond just a transaction, beyond just work, and how you do that on a Zoom call or a Google Meet call like this one. I'm still figuring it out. It's not easy. I doubt if there are people out there or many organizations out there who still who have cracked this puzzle as yet.
I believe you're into investing as well, angel investing as well. How's that going?
Yeah, Neil. So I got into angel investment a few years back, and my hypothesis of getting into angel investment was again related to my profession, which is HR, and over last 18, 19 years, I've seen a big change in the entire HR technology front itself, right? So
Okay.
if I rewind almost 2 decades back, there were
Mm.
only a handful of HR tech solutions out there. Most of
Mm.
them were developed. In fact, all of them were developed outside of India. There was no indigenous or home built HR tech solutions out there. Over
Mm.
the years, one of the great things which have happened in the Indian startup ecosystem, that there are lots and lots of HR tech solutions, homegrown HR tech solutions which have come up. Because people do realize that there are those nuances
Mm.
related to people and people function within the country, which needs to be built in HR tech solutions for them to be effective. And to me, that to me was has been an exciting pivot or a change which has come along in startups in India, specifically in the HR space.
Mm.
And through angel investments, I am just trying to contribute my bit, towards some of these organizations which are building HR tech solutions in the country, by not just providing capital but also providing my, whatever experience and learnings
Mm.
I've had in the space of HR to help these organizations build more efficient and effective HR tech solutions, because that really helps the entire fraternity and the ecosystem as a
Mm.
whole.
Interesting stuff. Sounds exciting. What are the key factors then you consider before investing in a HR tech startup then?
Yeah, so for me, the first and the foremost is the problem statement itself. What exactly
Mm.
the set tech solution is trying to solve for, right? Is it a real problem or not, right? And if it is, how is the solution different from what is already out there, right? So to me, those are the two starting points. Once I'm convinced about that, then I actually go deeper into how well they've thought through about various use cases, what is their product roadmap. So those are like the nitty gritties which I then go into. But then for me, the two foremost questions in my mind is those two which I just talked about, which is what exactly you're trying to solve for and how are you different. How is
Mm.
your tech solution different? And that to me is the other questions which needs to be taken before I go deeper, and then do my entire checks and balances and due diligences before.
Yeah, actually, going back to HR then, mental health, that's quite a big subject that
Yeah,
exploded over the last 20 years now.
yeah.
How do you have to train yourself? Are you aware?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're asking that question, Neil, because one thing which COVID has done, and again, and it may not be the right thing to say completely, but then one positive thing which has come out of COVID, the tough times which we all went through during the pandemic, is that the realization at large across organizations, leaders, and HR practitioners, that taking care of your people's health, both physical and mental,
Mm.
is no longer a good to have thing in your organization. It is a must to have for
Mm.
multiple reasons, right? First and foremost, purely from a business angle itself, if your people have to be productive, they need to be healthy. If people are not healthy, they're not going to be productive. And if you don't have productive team in place, there is no ROI, right? So there is a business case to that, simply put. If I go further than that, I think one of the biggest differentiators in today's world between a great organization and a good organization is that how well and how are you taking care of your people and
Mm.
its health and their health and well-being, right? So I speak to a lot of candidates, I interview a lot of candidates across levels, and I'm talking right from entry level junior folks right up to the senior most CXOs. One of the questions which gets asked 9 out of 10 times in my interviews is, what are your policies and practices around health and well-being of your company and of your people, right?
Mm.
And that's a great question, which basically then tells me that if you want to be an employer of choice out there amongst this really tough talent market, and if you want to differentiate yourself as a employer of choice, you need to focus on the health and well-being of your people, right? So those two aspects then tend to tell you that as HR practitioners, as HR leaders, you need to have a focus on it, and therefore how do you build your health and well-being practices becomes absolutely paramount. Now there are multiple things you can do. And one is obviously the kind of infrastructure which you're building for people, for your people within your office. How are you helping your people in terms of having sufficient downtime to take care of themselves? How are you building the culture within the organization to ensure that there are no unnecessary pushes and pulls which kind of pull people down when it comes to their well-being? Those are and then obviously there are these interventions which you can build in terms of tie-ups with organizations which are offering these health and well-being solutions and services, and
Mm.
offering them to your people, right? So those are some of the things which organizations now have to do, and some of the good organizations are already doing it. As I said, it's no longer a good to have; it's an absolute must to have for any organization to look at.
Well, last few questions then. If a founder had only 5 minutes to absorb, the core message of your book, what's like the one page or concept they must read?
Yeah, I think they must read 2 chapters, I would say. And those 2 chapters are chapter number 22 and 23. They're right at the end. Okay, and the reason consciously I put them right at the end. One of them I've already talked about, which is 20 HR for people mistakes you make, organizations make, and the second one is HR myths. Okay, in startups. Those are the 2 chapters which you should read. They're not very long chapters. They are like about 4-5 pages each. But I do believe that if you go through those 2 chapters, it will give you enough insights around why you should invest and spend time and your bandwidth on building right people practices in your organization, and why is it necessary to have that. Otherwise, you're going to plateau. Otherwise, you're not going to grow and evolve as an organization and going to achieve what you want to achieve with your organization. So for me, those are the 2 chapters which you absolutely must read. And once you read that, you will automatically figure out the chapters you need to focus on, depending on what your people priorities are in the organization. Because my book covers right from talent acquisition to culture to DEI to things around labor laws, compliance. I mean, it's pretty much the entire gamut of people practices are covered in my book. But you must start with those 2 chapters, and then you'll figure out which are the sections of the chapters you should then go through.
Last question then. People who want more information on the book and about you, what must they do?
Very active on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the place for anybody to find me. I'm not there on any other social media platform. So reach out to me. My direct messaging lines are always open, and I respond to every single message myself. I don't have a social media agency who manages my social media account or LinkedIn account. So the easiest way to reach me is through my LinkedIn account, and then we can pick up the conversation from there. My LinkedIn account also has links to my book and where the book is available. It has link to my website as well. So there's tons of information out there to know more about me and to reach out to me.
Yeah, because I've noticed you're the LinkedIn top voice. I mean, how does one become the LinkedIn top voice then?
I have no idea. I think the only thing which I've done is being very, very consistent with what I put out there on LinkedIn. Consistent both, not just in terms of how many times I post, but consistent in terms of the themes and topics which I write on, right? And if you see my LinkedIn posts, they're pretty much centered around 3 themes. I write about parenthood, my journey of being a parent for last 8 years, along with my daughter, whose name is Meher. I write about people practices, HR practices in startups, which is what my book is all about as well. And then I write about my fitness and running journey. I only write about those 3 things, and I go deep. I only talk about my learnings from my own experiences, and then that's what I share. And obviously, I built this over a period of time. So I think consistently having consistency around what you want to write is extremely important. And then obviously, based on that, how frequently you write upon it, and the originality of your content is really what matters. So that's what I have been doing for last, I would say, about 4.5 years. Got picked as LinkedIn Top Voice last year around July, August. I was not gunning for it. I was not aiming for it. It just came as a surprise, as a pleasant surprise. And yeah, it's right up there on my profile as well.
But do you get a lot of clients from your LinkedIn post then? Do you get a lot of interactions and stuff like that? Yeah, that must be pretty good.
I am on the verge of closing 2 clients, 2 accounts. I finished commercials discussions with both of them earlier today, and both of them reached out to me through my LinkedIn post.
Wow.
So amazing. Yeah, I do get a lot of people, prospects reaching out to me through LinkedIn. It's been a great platform, and that's why I said I channelize and focus all my energy as far as social media presence is concerned only on LinkedIn. I am not there on any other platform. I don't feel the need, to be honest.
Yeah. You talked about your fitness journey. I believe you're doing a marathon on Sunday, so good luck with that one.
Thank you, Neil. And this is the first time I'm going to be doing 2 marathons within a space of a month. Wow. I did my full marathon in Mumbai in January, 19th of January, and I'm doing another one in Delhi on Sunday.
Is the air really bad though in Delhi, right?
It wasn't pretty good during the winters, but what I'm hearing is it's a lot better now.
Saurabh, thank you for coming on the show today. Much appreciated. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Neil. This was amazing. I love the way you handled this conversation, and it was an absolute pleasure talking.
Actually, there's one question I've not asked you in terms of dealing with feedback. How do you go about doing that? Let's say you have to give harsh feedback.
Yeah, so I think, as long as you keep those three tenets, which is trust, transparency, and respect, right? To me, all your dealing, that is the foundation on which you need to build, which you need to operate on, right? So if I have to give feedback, which is not a pleasant feedback, it should be done in a manner where I'm not disrespecting the individual. Number one. Number two, it should come from a place where I am giving this feedback in order to make you a better, or help you become a better professional, a better individual, right? That's where I'm coming from. I'm not giving you this feedback because I'm trying to pull you down. There are no egos involved here. I think laying that platform and laying that mutual understanding is extremely important. And again, everybody has a different style of building it. But unless you build that, it will be very difficult for you to give that feedback. Second, for the other person to absorb that.